begins actually millennia ago with King Indradyumna. King Indradyumna was a very magnificent personality. This is in the Sata Yuga, the age of goodness. And the king himself, he had a burning desire. You know, we all have different desires, don't we? A desire for wealth, a desire for recognition, a desire for fame. But King Indradyumna had a burning desire to serve God. Somehow he wanted to be able to serve God directly. And there was a traveler that came by his kingdom and told him of a very strange deity thousands of miles away on a hill. And this deity was called Nila Madhava. And the king immediately, this stranger actually, he left, not really telling the king or anyone else where this deity was located. This is a very long story, and I'm not going to tell the entire thing, so you'll have to bear with me. But he sent out messengers and people to search for this Nila Madhava, and they all came back empty-handed, except for one of his messengers, his very Brahminical confidant, Vidyapati. And Vidyapati actually found this hill where Nila Madhava was being worshipped. Nila Madhava was being worshipped in seclusion, just by one person. And the Lord had the desire to be in a place where more people would come and worship him and serve him and benefit. You see, people come to the temple. You know, there's many different temples and different religions all over the world. And they're called, often enough, they're called the house of God. And we take that literally in our tradition, that the temple or the church or the mosque or the synagogue is actually the house of God, where God resides. And so in this time, there didn't seem to be any temples. And the deity gave King Indradyumna an instruction to build me a temple, and I will come. There's a movie, I think they say, build it and they'll come, right? I forget the name of that movie. But anyways, that's exactly what Krishna was saying to the king, Indradyumna. He was saying, build me a temple and I will come. And so the king, he built the temple. But the thing is, he waited and waited and waited. God didn't show up. He thought maybe he failed somehow or other. He didn't know what to think or what to do, what to say. He said, I'm a failure. God didn't come and appear in the temple. Somehow or other I've displeased God. But I don't care. I'm going to go into the forest and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to fast until I die if I have displeased God. And so the king went deep into the forest, and he was sitting there for quite some time. And finally he heard another message from the Lord. And the message this time said, come down to the beach. I'll meet you down there. So the king jumped up from his meditation. He leapt up from the middle of his fasting, and he ran swiftly through the forest and down to the beach. And he was looking around. There was no one, nothing. It didn't seem that there was anything going on. But then, out in the ocean, the king spied this magnificent red log. And the log was coming closer and closer. Each wave brought the log a little closer to the shore. And finally there was this magnificent wave, and the log came upon the shore and rolled right up to the king's feet. And the king saw some interesting signs on the log, because it was not an ordinary log. There on the log were engraved the signs of Vishnu. You know, Vishnu has 4 signs. Can the kids tell me any one of the signs? Yes?
The lotus.
The lotus. Yes, there's the lotus flower that was engraved on the log. Yeah?
Fish.
The what?
Fish.
Oh, okay, there was a discus, which is called the Surishan discus. Yeah? And a conch shell. Yes, and finally there was the conch shell and the lotus flower and the discus, and then there was a club. And this club the Lord uses to fight demons. And so anyways, here he realized that somehow or other God came in this very strange form. And he thought, I'll get my soldiers to take this magnificent log back to the temple, and there a sculptor can carve this log into the deity form. And so the soldiers came, and they tried as much as they could. They couldn't budge that log a fraction of an inch. And they brought horses, and they tied ropes around the log, and they couldn't budge that log just even a fraction of an inch. And then they brought elephants, these powerful elephants, and they tied the log to the elephants. And even the elephants, as straining as much as they were, couldn't move that log even a fraction of an inch. And in the meantime, there's this huge crowd had gathered around the commotions that were going on at the beach. And out of the crowd came two interesting people. One of them was a Brahmin. Actually, the king recognized him, but he didn't really know who he actually was. It was his old friend, Patita Vidyapati. And then there was another person that stepped out of the crowd, and he was a worker. And so on one hand, you have this Brahmin, this scholar, and on the other hand, you have this simple worker. And they came together, and at each end, they lifted up the log, they put it on the chariot, and they brought it back to the temple. And so as soon as it arrived at the temple, there were so many sculptors waiting for the log to appear, because the king had hired all of these sculptors to begin carving the log. But the strange thing is that the log had some strange force field around it. When they tried to carve the log, their tools bounced off of the log. They couldn't even touch the log. And finally, out of the crowd stepped another stranger. And he had a little pouch, like I do. And he tapped his pouch. He said, I brought my tools. And if you allow me to do the work, I'll take care of the carving the deities. But under one condition, everybody has to leave the temple. You have to vacate the temple until I'm completely finished. It'll be a few weeks. And so everyone vacated the temple, and the king came back to the gate of the temple every day. And he sat down by the gate of the temple, and he listened as the sculptor was carving the deities. He heard the carving going on. And that carving of the sculptor with his tools, it was like music to the king's ears. And he came day after day. And one day the king came to the gate of the temple, and he sat down like he usually did every morning. And he listened. And he listened. But there was no sound of the sculptor carving at the temple. He didn't know what to do. He waited and waited. There was silence, dead silence in the temple. And finally, he couldn't control himself anymore. He threw open the gates. He and his soldiers came bursting into the temple. And there, they found these strange looking deities that no one had ever seen before. And so in the meantime, the sculptor left. He said, you came into the temple. I told you, no one can come into the temple until I'm completely finished. I'm leaving. I'm finished. And so the king, he felt so guilty that he interrupted the sculptor's work. It looked like the deities were unfinished. They had strange faces and a body, but they didn't have any hands and arms. They didn't have any feet. And so the king felt so guilty. And then all of a sudden somebody showed up to alleviate the king's guilt. It was Narada Muni. You know, Narada Muni travels all over the universe on a musical instrument, a stringed instrument called the Veena. And on this sound vibration of the instrument of the Veena, he travels here and there throughout the universe, and now he descended into the courtyard of the temple. And when the king saw him, he immediately offered his respects. And when Narada Muni entered the temple and he saw these strange-looking deities, he immediately fell to the ground and he offered his respects to the deities. And so the king asked Narada Muni, "Tell me, I've never seen these deities before. They look very strange. But you immediately fell down on the ground to offer your respects when you saw them. You must know something about them." He said, "Oh yes," Narada Muni said. "Here is Krishna, here is Subhadra, his sister, and over here on the other side is Baladev, his brother. Actually, I once was passing by a room where the topics of Krishna were being spoken. The Krishna growing up in Vrindavan, Krishna with the gopis, Krishna with the cowherd boys, Krishna with his mother and father. And as the story was being told, Krishna and Subhadra and Baladev, his brother, they came outside the room, and they were listening in. And all of a sudden, something amazing happened. They were overwhelmed with joy. Their eyes brightened and grew larger and larger. Face became brightened with a huge smile from ear to ear. And then they attained a state of samadhi. Their hands came into their bodies, and they stood there. Sometimes the yogis want to enter into samadhi, but here, Krishna himself, hearing his own pastimes, growing up in Vrindavan, India. This is the holy place of Krishna and his devotees. And upon hearing those pastimes, Krishna himself, with Subhadra and Baladev, they all entered into a state of samadhi. And so that's what you have here, Krishna in this state. And so every year, for thousands of years now, they've had this wonderful festival of Rath Yatra. The Rath Yatra parade, Rath means chariot, and Yatra means a little journey. And so to go on the parade with the Lord Jagannatha, it's a wonderful opportunity. It's so festival. It's such a great festival because Krishna, he wants to be very merciful, just like he was being worshipped up in that hill with no one around. He wanted to attract many thousands and thousands of people to get the mercy of God. And so he had a temple built. He entered the temple as a deity. But Krishna wanted to expand that mercy, because usually people have to go to the temple or to the church or to the mosque to enter into that sanctified atmosphere. But Krishna said, "No, let me go out to the people. Let me go out to the street. I don't want to wait for people to come to me. I'm going out to the people." And so this festival is another extension of his mercy, that Krishna is coming out to offer himself to the public. But now even the mercy has expanded from that. Not only can we relish the deity and participate in the parade, but that mercy, Krishna has expanded that mercy in this age to enter into the holy name. Krishna has entered into his holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So Krishna, some people wonder, how is Krishna in the temple? He's a statue on the altar. But Krishna can appear in many, many different ways. He explains that I am the taste of water. He comes as water. I am the original fragrance of the earth. So when we're out in the earth, we're smelling the earth, we're smelling the flowers and the trees and the leaves. That's also a manifestation of Krishna. Krishna says, I am the light of the sun and the moon. So when we see that sun and we see that moon, immediately we're in the presence of God. And so in this way, God manifests himself in so many different ways. And even in the Bible, Jesus says, if two of you gather in my name, I will be present. And many, many religions, they explain the same thing, the sacredness, the holiness of the name of God. And so we have a double mercy today. We're chanting the holy name and also participating in this wonderful festival, this parade of Lord Jagannatha.